Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda bersama saya Rozman dan ini Niaga Awani. Bank Negara Malaysia akan mengumumkan keluaran dalam negara kasar KDNK pada jam 12.30 hari ini. KDNK Malaysia bagi suku ketiga 2024 dijangka berkembang pada 5.3% tahun ke tahun dipacu oleh pertumbuhan berterusan penggunaan domestik. MIDF Amanah Investment Bank Berhad berkata, Bank Pelaburan itu berkata perbelanjaan pengguna terus berkembang walaupun peningkatan pertumbuhan perdagangan runcit menjadi sederhana kepada 5.9% kepada suku ketiga berbanding 7.4% pada suku kedua.
Ini seiring dengan pertumbuhan sederhana sektor perkhidmatan pada 5.1% berbanding 5.9% pada suku kedua berdasarkan unjuran awal KDNK. Firma itu menambah pertumbuhan KDNK yang teguh tetapi lebih sederhana pada suku ketiga mencerminkan pertumbuhan perbelanjaan domestik yang sederhana. Jangkaan prestasi pertumbuhan yang mampan itu disokong oleh peningkatan guna tenaga, peningkatan pendapatan dan pemulihan dalam perbelanjaan pelancong. MIDF Amanah berkata kemungkinan peningkatan juga boleh berlaku berikutan pemulihan yang lebih teguh dalam perkhidmatan, ekspor dan kesan positif inflasi yang stabil. Pertumbuhan KDNK juga boleh menjadi lebih lemah daripada yang dijangkakan, berpotensi diseret ke bawah oleh perbelanjaan domestik yang sederhana dan pengeluaran pelombongan yang lebih lemah. Melangkah ke hadapan, firma itu menjangkakan pertumbuhan ekonomi Malaysia akan terus didorong oleh perbelanjaan pengguna dan perniagaan yang semakin meningkat serta pertumbuhan berterusan dalam permintaan luar. Bagaimanapun, firma pendidikan itu juga berhati-hati terhadap beberapa risiko negatif terhadap prospek pertumbuhan Malaysia, terutamanya dari segi luaran seperti peningkatan semula inflasi global, pertumbuhan dan permintaan yang lebih lemah di China dan Amerika Syarikat serta peningkatan berterusan dalam ketegangan geopolitik dan perdagangan.
Bursa Malaysia ditutup rendah pada Khamis walaupun mencatatkan kenaikan semasa sesi dagangan awal mencerminkan sentimen serantau yang lemah selepas ekuiti global memberikan petunjuk negatif dalam tempoh semalaman. Pada pukul 5 petang Khamis, FTSE Bursa Malaysia KLCI susut 10.82 mata untuk ditutup pada 1,600.68 daripada 1,611.50 ketika ditutup semalam. Namun bagaimanakah prestasi minggu ini bagi FBM KLCI? Dengan itu kita mempersilakan pakar Syed Muhammad Kimni Said Kamarudin merupakan Ketua Strategi MIDF Research. Saya nak ucapkan terima kasih Said. Pertama sekali, bagaimanakah prestasi FBM KLCI sepanjang minggu ini? Manakah beberapa faktor mungkin mempengaruhi pergerakan pasaran saham dengan KDNK suku ketiga termasuk juga dengan pilihan raya Amerika Syarikat yang mendapat Presiden baru? Mungkin boleh kongsikan.
Terlebih dahulu, terima kasih atas jemputan ke Awani. Sepanjang minggu ini, prestasi indeks FBM KLCI kembali suram dengan penyusutan sebanyak 1.3% atau jatuh 21 mata kepada 1,601 pada penutup semalam. Itu kembali di sekitar para psikologi 1,600 mata. Para pelabur dilihat bertindak mengambil untung setelah kenaikan indeks FBM KLCI pada minggu lepas yang didorong oleh positif knee-jerk reaction atau reaksi sentakan positif berikutan utamanya pilihan raya Presiden Amerika Syarikat dengan Donald Trump sebagai pemenang yang jelas dan pelabur pasaran mengalung-alungkan tindakan kedua-dua parti utama yang bertanding menerima keputusan pilihan raya tersebut, dan oleh itu tidak timbul risiko berlakunya pertuduhan dan perbalahan seperti pada pilihan raya tahun 2020 lepas yang membawa kepada rusuhan di Capitol Hill, Washington DC. Namun reaksi sentakan positif tersebut tidak bertahan lama dan indeks FBM KLCI kembali mengalami penurunan pada minggu ini berikutan penjualan saham-saham tempatan terutamanya oleh pengurus dana asing. Sepanjang minggu ini dana asing telah mencatatkan nilai jualan bersih hampir 240 juta ringgit di pasaran bursa Malaysia. Manakala tindakan penjualan oleh dana asing itu pula dilihat berkait penurunan nilai ringgit berbanding dolar Amerika. Sepanjang minggu ini sahaja nilai ringgit telah menyusut sebanyak lebih 2% berbanding dolar Amerika kepada 4.48 kini. Di samping itu, mata wang utama dunia yang lain juga menyusut berbanding dolar Amerika dengan US dollar index mencatatkan kenaikan sebanyak 2% sepanjang minggu ini. Kenaikan dolar Amerika berbanding mata wang dunia itu pula didorong oleh apa yang digelar sebagai Trump Trade atau reaksi para pelabur terhadap polisi ekonomi yang dicadangkan oleh Presiden-elect Donald Trump. umpamanya cadangan untuk melaksanakan tarif terhadap import dijangka akan menyumbang kepada tekanan inflasi dan oleh itu dilihat akan mengurangkan kepesatan pemotongan kadar faedah oleh Risau Persekutuan Amerika Syarikat. Manakala cadangan memotong kadar cukai pendapatan korporat daripada 21% kepada 15% pula berisiko meningkatkan kadar defisit fiskal dan ini dilihat menaikkan kadar yield atau hasil bagi bond-bond perbelanjaan Amerika.
Banyak telah dikongsikan oleh Kifni secara keseluruhan FBM ASEAN pada minggu ini mengalami dalam keadaan suram, diikuti juga dengan pasaran FBM ASEAN yang menurun sepanjang minggu ini, diikuti juga dengan ringgit yang susut berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat dan ada berapa lagi perkembangan terkini yang telah dikongsikan oleh Kifni mengenai kadar faedah dan juga pemotongan cukai korporat. Penting untuk kita teliti bagaimana ia merangkumi prestasi pasaran minggu ini. Mungkin boleh kongsikan daripada pecahan kepada kaunter atau sektor mana yang mendahului dan mana yang mengalami kejatuhan, Kifni?
Sepanjang minggu ini hanya 2 daripada 13 sektor didagang pada tahap yang lebih tinggi. Indeks sektor utility mencatat kenaikan tertinggi lebih 1% sepanjang minggu ini dan diikuti oleh indeks sektor peladangan di tempat kedua. Manakala indeks sektor industri mengalami kejatuhan terbesar hampir 3%. Minat para pelabur dalam sebahagian saham-saham syarikat sektor utility terutama berkaitan pembekalan air mungkin berhubung jangkaan kenaikan perbelanjaan oleh pihak kerajaan bagi infrastruktur pembekalan air untuk mengurangkan kadar non-revenue water atau NRW. Kenaikan indeks sektor peladangan pula dilihat seiring kenaikan harga minyak sawit mentah di pasaran hadapan yang baru-baru ini telah naik melebihi tahap RM5,000 setan. Kenaikan harga minyak sawit mentah di pasaran hadapan itu pula antaranya didorong oleh kejatuhan tahap pengeluaran. Pada bulan Oktober tahun ini, pengeluaran minyak sawit mentah Malaysia susut sekitar 7% tahun ke tahun. Manakala indeks sektor industri pula mengalami penurunan terbesar sepanjang minggu ini berikutan kejatuhan agak ketara. Harga saham syarikat utama sektor industri menghadapi tekanan jualan berikutan jangkaan penyusutan keuntungan akibat penurunan purata harga jualan atau ASP bagi produk-produk keluaran mereka.
Adakah kita dapat menjangkakan iaitu prestasi yang sama untuk sektor yang mendahului dan sektor yang kebelakang ini pada dalam tempoh masa dekat dan apakah antara jangkaan hala pergerakan pasaran saham daripada Kifni untuk masa terdekat?
Setelah berada di paras melebihi 1,680 mata pada bulan September lepas, indeks APEC CEO kemudiannya telah mengalami downswing atau ayunan penurunan dan kini berada di paras psikologi 1,600 mata. Atau yang menyumbang kepada penurunan ini adalah berikutan tindakan penjualan saham oleh dana-dana asing. Manakala keputusan tindakan penjualan saham oleh dana-dana asing itu pula dilihat berkait penurunan nilai ringgit berbanding dolar Amerika, yang mana setelah nilai ringgit mengukuh sehingga ke tahap 4.1 pada bulan September lalu, ia kemudiannya susut semula berbanding dolar Amerika dan kini berada di paras hampir 4.5. Namun pada bulan takhir tahun ini kami jangkakan akan berlaku pula upswing atau ayunan kenaikan bagi indeks APEC CEO. Ada 3 faktor yang akan menyumbang kepada jangkaan kenaikan ini. Pertamanya adalah asas ekonomi Malaysia yang baik dengan kadar pertumbuhan KDNK dijangka mencapai 5% tahun ini dan 4.6% bagi tahun depan berbanding hanya 3.6% tahun lepas. Seiring jangkaan pertumbuhan berterusan ekonomi makro, keuntungan korporat juga dijangka akan berkembang dengan kadar yang baik tahun ini dan juga pada tahun depan. Keduanya kami jangka akan berlaku kemasukan semula dana-dana asing yang akan memasukkan harga saham tempatan pada bulan takhir tahun ini. Kemasukan semula dana-dana asing ini pula akan didorong oleh jangkaan kenaikan semula nilai ringgit berbanding dolar Amerika. Jangkaan itu bertunjangkan asas ekonomi Malaysia yang baik dengan pelabur antarabangsa memilih untuk kembali semula ke Malaysia pada paras yang lebih menarik setelah penyusutan nilai ringgit di hampir 2 bulan kebelakangan ini. Dan terakhirnya jangkaan ayunan kenaikan indeks APEC ini adalah didorong oleh valuation atau nilaian yang relatif murah. pada masa kini indeks APEC LCI didagang pada price earnings ratio atau nisbah harga pendapatan sekitar 14.8 kali. Tahap ini adalah di bawah paras historical range atau rata historical 16.5 kali.
Kefni, berbakikan kurang daripada seminit, KDNK suku ketiga akan diumumkan hari ini. Mungkin boleh kongsikan bagaimanakah prestasi ini mungkin mencorak pergerakan pasaran minggu depan?
Seperti yang saya nyatakan, ini adalah salah satu daripada faktor yang akan kami jangka menyumbang kepada ayunan kenaikan bursa saham tempatan pada bulan takhir tahun ini. Suku ketiga KDNK dijangka akan naik melebihi paras 5% dan ini akan menjadi basis kepada kembalinya minat pelabur tempatan dan juga asing terhadap prospek pasaran saham tempatan.
Baik, itu perkongsian mengenai prestasi ataupun analisis mingguan FBMK ASEAN. Apakah antara kaunter atau sektor yang untung dan rugi, bagaimanakah keseluruhan pasar yang dapat kita rangkumkan pada minggu ini dan yang telah dijangkakan juga oleh MIDF terhadap KDNK suku ketiga yang akan diumumkan mungkin melebihi 5%. Dan sudah tentu teruskan bersama kami di mana kami akan bawakan analisis mendalam pada jam 12.30 hari bersama ahli panel untuk kita fahami bagaimanakah prestasi terkini suku ketiga KDNK 2024 yang bakal diumumkan insya-Allah tengah hari nanti. Sekali lagi saya nak ucapkan terima kasih kepada Syed Muhammad Kifni Syed Kamarudin merupakan Ketua Strategi MIDF Research dan kita akan teruskan dengan laporan ringkas dagang.
Penyedia penyelesaian pembungkusan industri berintegrasi LNP Global Berhad LNP melantik Lee Sun Sui sebagai penggarap eksekutif kumpulan berkuat kuasa 13 November 2024. Sun Sui mempunyai pengalaman lebih 30 tahun dalam bidang kejuruteraan dengan kepakaran dalam sains terapan dan pendidikan serta pembangunan R&D dan industri aeroangkasa, semikonduktor dan sains hayat. Pen Malaysia Corporation Berhad melaporkan perbezaan 11.4% bagi kerugian bersihnya dalam penyata kewangan diaudit dan tidak diaudit bagi tahun kewangan berakhir 30 Jun 2024. Pen Malaysia Corporation dan anak syarikatnya terlibat dalam pembuatan, ekspor, pemasaran dan pengedaran coklat dan kuih muih. LBS Bina Group Berhad menandatangani memorandum persefahaman MOU dengan Invest Sabah Berhad, Lembaga Kemajuan Perhutanan Negeri Sabah dan Midwest Greenstem Berhad bagi meneroka projek tenaga boleh diperbaharui RE. Dalam makluman kepada Bursa Malaysia, pembangun Hartanah itu berkata, kerjasama itu melibatkan cadangan pembinaan loji hidrogen hijau 10 gigawatt di Sabah. Laporan penuh di saluran 501 dan astroawani.com serta dagangnews.com.
Baik, sebenarnya kita menunggu keputusan suku ketiga KDNK 2024 yang bakal diumumkan insya-Allah pada tengah hari. Sebelum itu saya akan kongsikan dulu laporan ataupun data terkini yang telah dikeluarkan oleh Jabatan Perakaan Malaysia DOSA mengenai statistik guna tenaga suku tahun ketiga 2024. Sudah tentu kita nak melihat dalam pasaran buruh di Malaysia ketika ini dalam tempoh suku ketiga, berapakah jumlah jawatan yang telah diwujudkan dalam sektor ekonomi, iaitu sebanyak 9.01 juta jawatan yang telah dicatat ataupun telah diwujudkan dalam sektor ekonomi dalam pelbagai sektor dan jawatan diisi sebanyak 97.9%, manakala kekosongan berbaki 2.1%, dan ini adalah jumlah jawatan yang telah ditawarkan setakat suku ketiga 2024. Seterusnya untuk kita teliti bagaimanakah prestasi suku ke suku, kita lihat jawatan mengalami prestasi tahunan juga meningkat dari suku ke suku dan tahun ke tahun. Apabila kita meneliti daripada sini 8.57 juta pada tahun suku pertama 2022, iaitu tahun pemulihan daripada pandemik COVID-19. Namun daripada jumlah itu tahun 2022, kita lihat 2 tahun yang lepas sehinggalah suku ketiga kita dapat lihat ia telah mencatat peningkatan dalam jumlah jawatan yang telah diwujudkan kepada 9.01 jumlah jawatan yang ada dalam pasaran setakat suku ketiga 2024. Seterusnya dalam 5 sektor, kalau kita lihat pertanian, perlombongan dan perkuaran, pembuatan dan pembinaan perkhidmatan, daripada 5 sektor ini ini kita dapat lihat satu sektor yang mengalami jumlah jawatan yang tertinggi adalah daripada sektor perkhidmatan yang telah merekodkan jumlah jawatan yang ditawarkan pada 4.64 juta jawatan yang telah ditawarkan dalam sektor perkhidmatan. Diikuti juga dengan jumlah jawatan yang kedua tertinggi iaitu jawatan daripada sektor pembuatan yang telah merekodkan jumlah jawatan sebanyak 2.3 juta jawatan. Dan ini adalah antara dua jawatan yang mengalami kita lihat jumlah tawaran pekerjaan yang paling tinggi adalah daripada sektor pembinaan dan juga perkhidmatan ni, dan ini adalah antara tiga sektor iaitu pembuatan, pembinaan dan perkhidmatan antara tiga sektor yang mengalami jumlah jawatan yang agak tinggi dalam sektor pasaran buruh di Malaysia ketika ini. Dan jawatan mengikut kemahiran, kita lihat daripada segala jawatan yang telah ditawarkan iaitu jumlah jawatan yang telah diisi daripada kategori iaitu separuh mahir dengan merekodkan sebanyak 62.5%, dan kita lihat jumlah jawatan yang diisi yang diwujudkan 9 juta yang diisi kebanyakannya daripada pekerja separuh mahir sebanyak 62.5% jumlah yang ditawarkan, namun jawatan yang diisi sebanyak 62.7%, manakala kekosongan juga banyak dalam kategori pekerjaan separuh mahir iaitu hampir mencecah 60%, dan pewujudan jawatan juga banyak dalam kategori separuh mahir iaitu 63.3%. Dan ini adalah secara keseluruhannya untuk kita teliti bagaimanakah jumlah jawatan yang telah ditawarkan pada suku ketiga dan berapa banyak pekerja yang telah mengisi jawatan-jawatan di luar sana. Sudah tentu ini adalah prestasi yang dapat saya kongsikan mengenai statistik guna tenaga pada suku ketiga 2024. Jangan ke mana-mana, banyak lagi laporan yang akan kami bawakan selepas ini.
Bila kerja sendiri, semua kena buat sendiri. Tapi, bersama rakan niaga, semuanya dapat ditempuhi bersama.
Malaysia sebenarnya berada di kedudukan kedua terburuk di dunia berkaitan keseimbangan hidup dan kerja.
LRT3 sudah akan mula beroperasi suku ketiga 2025. Kerja-kerja fizikal dan penstrukturan sudah mencecah 95%.
KPM sebenarnya sedang memperincikan cadangan untuk menyediakan allowance kos sara hidup tingkatan 6.
Libat urus antara umat Islam dan agama lain penting supaya dapat mengelakkan ataupun membawa kepada Islamofobia.
Kau nak hidup, kau keluar.
Betul bapa aku tu ada kena-mengena dengan sejarah tempat ni. Ini semua perangkap.
Cepat masuk.
Sana. Awak sedar tak apa yang awak dah buat?
Hadi takkan masuk hutan kalau kau tak racun otak dia dengan idea bapa kau.
Yusof! Apa pula salah aku ni?
Stream ke semua episod Project Exit dan menangi tiket gala dan hoodie Kaha dengan Astro Rewards.
University Malaya UM is expected to offer a cardiothoracic specialist training course this October.
There will be no U-turn on the implementation of the Vehicle Entry Permit VEP for all foreign vehicles entering Malaysia from Singapore.
Diesel sales at petrol stations have decreased by 30% within the first week of the fuel subsidy rationalisation on June 10th.
Memasuki hari kedua lawatan rasmi Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim ke 5 Peru, beliau hari ini terlibat dalam sidang kemuncak CEO APEC sebagai salah seorang panelis. Banyak perkara dikongsikan beliau terutama berkait cabaran AI dan bagaimana kita harus mendepaninya. Harith Asyraf bersedia untuk bawakan perkembangan lanjut. Harith, apa yang menarik dalam sesi dialog tadi?
Okey, baik, terima kasih rakan setugas di Pusat Penyiaran Asia Bukit Jalil, dan sudah tentu hari ini memasuki hari kedua secara rasminya program Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim seiring dengan Minggu Pemimpin-Pemimpin Ekonomi APEC ataupun AELW yang berlangsung sehingga 16 hari bulan nanti. Dan sudah tentu antara yang menarik hari ini yang membuka program Perdana Menteri hari ini adalah berkenaan dengan APEC CEO Summit ataupun sidang kemuncak CEO APEC. Dan sudah tentu salah satu sesi yang terlibat, yang Perdana Menteri terlibat secara langsung adalah berkenaan dengan salah satu topik yang cukup menarik, iaitu AI ataupun kecerdasan buatan. Dan perkara ataupun apa yang dinyatakan oleh Perdana Menteri adalah beliau menekankan komitmen kerajaan Malaysia menerusi kerangka ekonomi madani untuk mempersiapkan negara menghadapi masa depan yang dipacu oleh AI dengan fokus kepada inklusiviti, pendidikan dan memperkasakan tenaga kerja untuk menerima teknologi baharu. Bercakap soal pendidikan, itu yang banyak kali diulang oleh Perdana Menteri dalam forum yang berlangsung sekitar hampir 1 jam atau 45 minit begitu, di mana kalau kita perincikan apa yang dinyatakan oleh Perdana Menteri, demokrasi pendidikan ataupun education democratization adalah perkara asas dalam usaha untuk meningkatkan kepintaran manusia dalam mendepani cabaran AI. Di mana beliau menyatakan bahawa potensi untuk gangguan ataupun cabaran oleh AI ini tidak boleh lari. Ya, memang akan ada. Itu yang dinyatakan oleh Perdana Menteri. Tetapi bagaimana manusia itu harus mencari ruang dan juga peluang meningkatkan ilmu serta pendidikan dalam nak memastikan bahawa kita dapat mendepani cabaran-cabaran yang wujud lantas apabila kecerdasan buatan ataupun AI ini semakin canggih. Dan kita dengarkan sedikit petikan apa yang dinyatakan oleh Perdana Menteri dalam sesi APEC CEO Summit pada sebelah pagi di Peru ini.
They have to face that. I think the panelists have been focusing on the issue of training and expertise, which means we should not rely on a few of the so-called professional elites, but to make sure that it is the access to education is further democratized, either through a university or faculties or massive training. I believe that in our Malaysian experience, the huge focus on digital for the people, for the rakyat, it's like a mass education, like the alphabetization, the new introduction to basic reading, 3R. But here it is focused on digital technology, on AI, and never underestimate the wisdom of the masses, even without real formal education. We have tried in some districts about coding, who has poor mathematics, poor science, no engineering, but expert in coding. I can't explain how, but somehow rather human ingenuity forced them to then excel in some fields. So I think whilst we must address these concerns about immediate disruption in some areas, but the strategy and the focus and public policy to embark on this massive democratization of access to AI in every village, in every urban including the urban poor and university and schools, if we can succeed in that, inshallah we're able to resolve that problem. Arigato.
Baik, apa yang boleh saya kongsikan di sini antara lain apa yang dinyatakan oleh Perdana Menteri ataupun sesi tersebut, ianya sebenarnya yang cukup menarik sekali adalah ia turut terlibat dengan beberapa ataupun berada sama dalam sesi itu adalah beberapa individu-individu yang cukup penting. Antaranya Naib Presiden Data dan AI Microsoft Zia Mansur, Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Wubil Yang Bin Wang, dan juga Naib Presiden Hal Ehwal Kerajaan dan Polisi Awam Google Karen Bhatia, serta dihostkan oleh Jean De Silva yang merupakan ABEC Kanada, dan bertemakan ataupun melihat kepada tajuknya peluang dan cabaran dalam revolusi AI. Sudah tentu sidang kemuncak APEC CEO Summit ini turut mendapat respon dari pemimpin ataupun pemain industri global. Kita dengarkan sedikit petikannya.
large businesses and governments themselves, training them how to do so. In Malaysia recently, we announced, for example, a program where we were going to partner with 161, all of their universities, to create what are called career certificates that enable people who may not be advanced students or advanced degrees at all, just to get basic education that will allow them to get entry-level jobs in the AI-enabled sector. So a super narrow kind of example, but something that needs to be replicated at scale. And then I think the last thing is going to be public policy, sound regulation, sound public policy. Everything from cloud-first kinds of policies to making sure that we strike the right balance when it comes to the guardrails of really important challenges along the lines of what you were mentioning before.
Okey, baik, itu antara perkongsian awal yang dapat saya bawakan buat masa ini. Banyak lagi program-program menaik yang antara lain adalah Perdana Menteri akan bertemu dengan Google, ada dengan persatuan-persatuan ataupun komuniti Islam di Peru ini, dan juga termasuklah beliau akan bertemu dengan Presiden Indonesia Prabowo Subianto dalam satu program khas bersama dengan APEC Business Advisory Council. Itu akan saya bawakan dalam buletin-buletin awani yang seterusnya. Sekian sahaja saya bawakan liputan dari 5 Peru bersama juru kamera Makruzi Muhammad Saman. Untuk Astro Awani, kita kembali ke Pusat Penyiaran Asia Bukit Jalil.
Kewangan iklim terus menjadi tumpuan di COP29 di Baku, Azerbaijan. Selain peruntukan oleh kerajaan, keterlibatan institusi kewangan juga memainkan peranan cukup penting. Namun, bagaimanakah realiti produk pembiayaan kewangan di rantau ASEAN ketika ini dalam konteks pembangunan mampan dan apakah risiko dan cabarannya? Di tekanan di Dzulfitri Yusof bertemu Ketua Kelasiran Perniagaan UOB Bank, Melissa Moy.
Terima kasih rakan setugas di Niaga Awani, dan pastinya cerita mengenai kewangan iklim itulah yang menjadi teras dan juga fokus kepada COP29 ini. Tapi kami ingin bawa dalam konteks ASEAN, bagaimanakah instrumen dan juga pembiayaan yang sudah ada, bagaimanakah contoh-contoh projeknya yang telah dijalankan. Dan dalam aspek itu saya berkesempatan menemui ketua bagi kelestarian perniagaan di UOB Bank, iaitu Melissa Moy. Beliau berceritakan bagaimanakah ekosistem kepada climate financing di rantau Asia Tenggara. Namun beliau juga mengatakan bahawa apakah yang perlu dibincangkan dan juga peluang yang ada dalam kewangan iklim ini.
Climate financing is sort of a very broad topic and a very broad opportunity. So from a very specific financing perspective, it's essentially money that goes towards either green use of proceeds or sustainable climate-related use of proceeds. So specific investments in interventions, CapEx-related, for things like energy efficiency, renewable energy, for adaptation finance, that you can define as green, that is accepted by the market as something that's going to support from a climate mitigation or adaptation perspective. So that's sort of one area that we look at. The other area of climate financing from a product perspective is called climate-linked or sustainability-linked financing. These are general use of corporate general use of proceeds funding that is actually linked to the achievement of a number of sustainability performance targets for a company. So a company can say, I'm going to take out a loan, it's going to be X amount of dollars, and contingent on me reaching these 3 SPTs, so either greenhouse gas emissions reduction, the number of women on our board of directors, our waste reduction, whatever it may be, that is perceived to be and accredited to be ambitious, then they can get preferential interest rates in terms of their financing. So climate-related financing is sort of these two major areas, use of proceeds or linked financing.
Kelompok SME dan juga kumpulan rentan seringkali menjadi kelompok yang paling teruk terjejas ataupun menerima impak daripada perubahan iklim. Justru bagaimana kewangan iklim dapat memberikan kelegaan dan juga pembiayaan yang baik kepada mereka. Apakah akses yang ada, dan juga bagi UOB Bank, bagaimanakah caranya untuk mereka ini mendapatkan akses dan juga bentuk bantuan yang dilakukan untuk membantu mereka membina kerangka pembiayaan.
Market practices is you need to have what we call an SPO, so a second-party opinion provider that takes a look at the framework and the use of proceeds in order to determine whether or not something is ambitious or not. This is the general market standard. At UOB, one of the things that we've realized is, in particular for the SME sector, because SPOs and these framework certifications is quite costly, that it's a deterrent for some of our SME clients to actually approach and be able to take advantage of sustainability-linked financing. So what we've actually done is we've launched programs. We have a sustainability-linked financing framework where we are targeting SMEs through a multi-pronged approach to help support their capacity building, the development of a strategy around sustainability, the assurance, either certification as well as their transparency in terms of their ratings from a sustainability perspective. And through this program, we actually have a preset number of SPTs that have been SPO'd. Okay. It's a lot of acronyms. Essentially what we're saying is that if a SME client is able to demonstrate either a greenhouse gas emissions reduction of a certain percentage, or ISO certification related to sustainability, or an improvement in their CDP rating, which is a carbon disclosure project rating, then we're able to give them preferential rates. We also, though, have this sort of wraparound because we also recognize that SMEs need particular support. And in Singapore, we're partnering with Enterprise Singapore so that there's grants available for them to then access a whole menu of support ecosystem in order to build these strategies, get certification, improve their CDP rating, and then we're able to then extend preferential financing to them. So the view is that, especially from an SME perspective, we need to be thinking about what's this whole ecosystem type of approach that we can provide them for support.
Kami juga tanyakan kepada Melissa mengenai apakah konteks persekitaran keuangan iklim di rantau Asia Tenggara, khususnya negara-negara ASEAN. Apa yang boleh difahami mengenai sektor keuangan yang lebih lestari dan juga respon terhadap perubahan iklim. Dan yang paling penting sekali, apakah keperluan yang utama yang perlu ada dari rantau Asia Tenggara.
There are different contexts from an ASEAN perspective, but I do think there is a common general baseline in which we can look at energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reduction, so on and so forth, and the types of use of proceeds, what's generally accepted as green, that you can then classify as sustainable financing. I think one of the more challenging conversations is around transition financing and how you look at and define transition, and that is very early on. It's very nascent in terms of how companies are looking at it, banks are looking at it, and regulators are looking at it. And so I think it really is a bespoke conversation and approach on how do you support our clients towards their transition-related efforts and how they're looking at financing towards them. And whether or not you need to label something as transition is a bit of a moot point. I think it's really about how do we engage with our clients and support them in that conversation. But context and regional context is extremely important. The understanding that a company working in Singapore has a very different opportunity than a company in challenges and risks than one in Malaysia, one in Indonesia, one in Vietnam. And so we need to be very cognizant of being very pragmatic and work with the real economy in their trajectory.
Itu cerita mengenai institusi keuangan, tapi dalam masa yang sama bagaimana peranan kerajaan dan juga pembentukan ataupun kerangka polisi dan dasar yang perlu diketengahkan ataupun dijuarai oleh kerajaan, dan bagaimana ini menjadi enabler ataupun pemudah cara bagi pihak institusi dan juga pihak yang memerlukan pinjaman untuk dalam hal perubahan iklim.
I think one of the major enabling factors is government policies that are then also linked to opportunities in decarbonization. And in the absence of government policies that work together, it is a challenge to support the real economy to decarbonize. So part of what we can do is, number one, continue to have conversations with regulators, sectoral bodies. From a UOB perspective, we are members of GFANZ and we're co-chairs of the GFANZ Public Policy work stream, and that really is about how do we capacity build, how do we share opportunities and ideas, understanding that ASEAN is at varying levels of understanding, varying levels of challenges, and how do we bring the capacity and knowledge from a global and regional perspective to the country level so that they can then work with their financial institutions, work with their sectors in order to move forward. So it really is this continuous conversation, and we need to have this inter-country cooperation and conversation to move things forward.
Sekian saja perkongsian kami untuk Niaga Awani. Kami bawakan dari COP29 yang berlangsung di Baku, Azerbaijan ini. Kita terus saja bersama rakan tugas di studio.
Dibawakan oleh penaja utama jelajah jiwa SME, Unify Business, rakan digital pilihan anda.
Glide Teknologi sedang berhad. Glide Teknologi menyasarkan untuk meraih jualan sebanyak 30 juta ringgit dalam tempoh 5 tahun hasil pengkomersialan minyak transformer berasaskan ester minyak sawit yang dihasilkan Lembaga Minyak Sawit Malaysia MPOB Glide. Presiden dan pengasas Glide Teknologi, Datuk Muhazli Muhammad berkata, jualan itu akan diperoleh daripada pasaran Malaysia serta ekspor di negara serantau.
Beliau berkata kerjasama dengan MPOB akan memanfaatkan sumber minyak sawit negara untuk menghasilkan produk yang seiring dengan piawaian alam sekitar, sosial dan tadbir urus ESG global.
Apa tu pasaran 30 juta, maksudnya kita agak rasional punya target. Yang mana sekarang ni kita adalah pengeluar minyak transformer, yang mana kita membekal kepada TMB, anak syarikat dan juga pembuat transformer yang sekarang ni dekat Malaysia. Sekarang ni kita supply minyak yang kita panggil mineral, yang mana petroleum base. Dan sekarang ni volume kita kata kapasiti yang diperlukan oleh dalam negara TMB sendiri untuk mineral saja dah 5 juta liter. 5 juta liter setahun. Kalau contohnya kalau kita tukar, kita sebab target TMB adalah 2030. Ada di zero nak pakai semua on ESG. Negara luar seperti Singapura, diorang dah guna. Maksudnya, tapi diorang guna soya base. Seperti Datuk DG beritahu tadi, soya base dah dekat market dunia, soya base, rapeseed semua dah ada. Jadi kita ada satu produk yang mana kita ada produk palm oil yang mana kita boleh market, yang mana produk dia kualitinya hampir sama ataupun lebih baik. Macam Datuk DG kata, produk kita lagi baik pada yang soya base. Cuma kita kena ada satu platform yang mana kita boleh memasarkan dan memarket produk kita ni. Jadi kami dari Glide Teknologi ni kita ambil cabaran tu. Kita tahu produk ni boleh dipasarkan di lokal dan juga global.
Beliau berkata demikian selepas menghadiri majlis menandatangani perjanjian pengkomersialan di antara MPOB dengan Glide Teknologi bagi minyak transformer berasaskan sawit. Katanya Glide Teknologi memberi tumpuan untuk memenuhi permintaan dalam sektor tenaga boleh baharu dan tenaga digabungkan dengan kerjasama bersama MPOB dalam mengukuhkan peranan sebagai pengeluar bumi putra. Glide Teknologi akan membuat pelaburan awal sebanyak 9 juta ringgit untuk membangunkan kemudahan pengeluaran canggih di Shah Alam apabila pengeluarannya dijangka bermula pada suku ketiga 2025.
Kita nak untuk commercialize untuk industri, untuk ester base ni kita kena invest lah. Kita base kepada 2 juta USD. Kita akan beli new equipment, new blending plant dekat yang mana kita sekarang ni kita ada existing, kita dah ada plant dekat Shah Alam, yang mana kita akan totally set up the new one untuk produce the MPOB Glide ester base transformer.
Pasaran global minyak transformer ester bernilai $145 juta pada tahun 2023, dijangka hampir 2 kali ganda kepada $286.6 juta menjelang 2030 dengan kadar pertumbuhan tahunan kukuh sebanyak 10.1%. Pelaburan strategik dan kepakaran Glide Teknologi meletakkan syarikat itu dalam kedudukan yang baik untuk merebut peluang dalam pasaran yang berkembang pesat itu.
Dibawakan oleh penaja utama jelajah jiwa SME, Unify Business, rakan digital pilihan anda.
Kerajaan akan terus mempertahankan setiap inci kedaulatan negara dan tidak sesekali akan bertolak ansur terhadap sebarang tuntutan daripada pihak-pihak tertentu.
Negara perlu mengurangkan kebergantungan kepada pekerja asing berkemahiran rendah. Pertubuhan Kemanusiaan Antarabangsa Malaysia MHO menggesa Kementerian Kesihatan menjalankan siasatan berhubung dakwaan kewujudan sebuah klinik kosmetik yang dikendalikan doktor palsu di Monkiara.
Aku
Aku tak ajak hang suruh menipu orang tau. Dan aku tak suruh pun hang pakai palsu tu. Ni Pak Samad, saya pun tak suruh dia pakai rambut palsu. Tapi kalau jenis kerinting tu, cantik. Dia.
Satu dekad penuh gemilang, sepak takraw kini kembali penuh dengan aksi mendebarkan. Dapatkan tiket anda sekarang. Pelanggan Astro juga boleh memenangi tiket di aplikasi My Astro. Jangan lepas peluang keemasan ini.
The world's greatest sport awaits its newest stage as fight night like no other. Welcome to Las Vegas. The top two go off the road. Massive spin in the middle of the pack. Whoa! Into the barriers. Back on the street. Charles Leclerc, absolutely brilliant! Max Verstappen wins the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Viva Las Vegas! That's entertainment.
Apa signifikan dengan pengumuman ataupun berita yang keluar dari media China ini berkaitan dengan hasrat Malaysia untuk menyertai gabungan BRICS?
Kita mau dapat lebih banyak umpamanya pelaburan daripada negara China.
Kalau melihat kepada Akta Kanak-Kanak 2001, adakah kita terlalu lambat untuk melihat proses untuk meminda akta sedia ada?
Kita perlu ada penyelarasan. Kita tak mahu bekerja secara silo.
Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tehmina. Kaoosji. Niaga Spotlight goes through the week in future affairs and economic analysis. Today on analysis, we're looking at, of course, urban redevelopment and, of course, balancing developers together with the rakyat special interests. Right, so just as a little bit of an introduction, now the Urban Redevelopment Act, or URA, is a proposed law that aims to revitalize cities by improving infrastructure, urban living quality and the safety of older buildings in Malaysia. The Housing and Local Government Ministry, or the KPKT, is currently working with various agencies, including the Attorney General's Chambers, to draft the URA to be tabled in Parliament by 2025. KPKT Minister Na Khaw Ming has stated that the URA has the potential to unlock numerous investment opportunities, transform the cityscape and generate quote-unquote hundreds of billions in GDP. Now, the URA's goals include modernizing urban areas via infrastructure development, providing affordable housing, improving living standards for all Malaysians, and ensuring the safety of older buildings. The URA Act is also expected to increase the availability of affordable housing in line with the Madani government's commitment to building 500,000 affordable housing units by 2025, and this is under the 12th Malaysia Plan. This panel discussion today aims to balance rakyat's housing interests and home buyers' rights with government and developers' vision for sustainable urban renewal. Joining me in the studios now live are Datuk Chang Kim Loong, who is Honorary Secretary General with the National House Buyers Association, HBA Malaysia, and Puan Saleha Yusof, Executive Director and Regional Head of Research and Consulting at Nawawi T Property Consultants. Very good morning. Welcome to the both of you. How are you doing? Fantastic. Right. So if I could get started off with the discussion first, Datuk Chang, proposing this to you first. So how does this Urban Redevelopment Act, the URA, justify its need, given that there are already 9 pre-existing laws that actually govern and look after this area?
Well, the Madani government has made several press releases about this proposed law on the pretext of rejuvenation, revitalization, renewal and redevelopment. These are beautiful words. I think it is a good thing. We should not stifle redevelopment. That is good. However, the announcement that they proceeded such a law has met with a lot of trepidation, objections from organizations like KLRA+, Sustainable Development, a lot more other representatives of JMBs, MCs, Resident Association, Higher Institute of Learning too. Now, the crux of this issue is because of the consent threshold. The government announced to say that any property less than 30 years old must require 80% consent. More than 30 years old requires 75% consent. That's the threshold that that a lot of the house buyers are objecting. So our stand is that every one single owner is important. The threshold should always be 100%. There's no such thing as having 80 or 75% at all. Every one owner is important. Hence, the consent of every one owner should be obtained if you embark into wanting to do an Urban Redevelopment Act. The law is good, like I say. However, we have got a lot more other protections in current law. We have got the existing Federal Constitution. We have got the National Land Code 1965, Housing Development Control License Act 1966, Strata Title Act. We got the Strata Management Act, and then we got the Land Acquisition Act, just to name a few. But to ensure that the building is structurally safe and residential structures are built reasonably adequate, then we have got the Street and Drainage Act. We have got the Urban Redevelopment. We got the Uniform Building Bylaws, as well as Town and Country Planning Act. But to eradicate crimes, we have got the laws on Criminal Procedure Code. We've got the Penal Code. Most importantly, do we really need a new Urban Redevelopment Act that is going to affect all the house buyers? That's our issue.
Right. So now let's also reframe it from an angle whereby a statement has been made by RADA, which are the Real Estate and Housing Developers Association. And according to them, the URA will provide clearer guidance for urban renewal projects. Is there not clear enough guidance according to the specific 9 existing laws right now, Datuk Chang?
Well, the laws are there already. It has been there prevalent for a long time. The laws are clear. If the laws are not good enough, by all means, please amend it and improve it. But you don't have to have a new law called the Urban Redevelopment Act, because it's going to be opening a new can of worms. There's more to it than just an Urban Redevelopment Act of rejuvenation or redevelopment. A lot more other things that we can foresee. We can foresee even house buyers quarreling among themselves. You're going to fuel a battle between groups who agree with it and groups who do not agree with it. You're actually triggering a war between households, between owners, between neighbors.
All right. So these are definitely some thoughts to chew upon and to digest as well, considering that there are actually 139 allocated areas that DBKL has been informed according to the proposed URA. Puan Saleha, moving into some perspectives from an urban economist angle, tell me about what you're seeing about the landscape so far.
Okay, thank you. When we talk about urban economics, we are not only looking at the economic perspective of the redevelopment projects.
Right, and the potential GDV, as we say.
GDV 332.5 billion sounds great. But what,
sure, on paper, fantastic, right?
Yeah, what does this 332.5 billion means to a PPR residents who can no longer afford to buy anything above 200,000 in the city centre, where it is very convenient for these people to go to work? So I think I concur with Datuk Chang that we currently have sufficient laws to cover redevelopment projects. But I think, in my opinion, what is clearly lacking is good public consultation.
Right.
I think in many countries, for example, like in Singapore, I always like to cite Singapore because they have done a very tremendous job in terms of redevelopments.
They also have quite limited land space, so that forces you to have to optimize. Malaysia, of course, we are blessed with much larger geography. Yeah.
So what they do, I would like to use this terminology.
Sure.
Crowdsource ideas.
Okay.
Not only from the government agencies. For example, like currently we are having KPKT, Plan Malaysia, JPM, and all those other agencies debating among themselves. But have we crowdsourced ideas from the residents themselves?
Yes, true.
Yeah, the affected residents, business players within that particular area, and then professionals and also academics. These are all important stakeholders, because a city does not consist only people who just live there.
Of course.
But when you uproot residents from their current living area, you are also uprooting their lifestyle, their culture, and all the connectivity that they have with that particular area. So it's very human-centric rather than it's GDV-driven when we want to embark on redevelopment.
Absolutely. I hear you very much on those perspectives, and I resonate with the fact that out of those 139 areas, a bulk of them are actually Project Perumahan Rakyat, which is public housing. Now, each one of them is an ecosystem unto its own.
Yes.
So let's perhaps expand the lens a little wider, Puan Saleha. So rather than look at a perspective where we're completely bringing down buildings and then raising them back up from the ground, what could be facilitated to actually refurbish and refresh the existing buildings that we have?
Okay. Many of the projects, if you look at the map that I have here.
Sure. Okay, I do see it over here.
Many of them are actually all low-cost housing. So in the past, maybe in the 60s and 70s, most of them are 4 to 5 story walk-up apartment. And then the sizes are also quite small, ranging from 450 to 550 square feet.
Right.
Which is not a very decent size for a family to grow. So I think one of the aspects of the redevelopment and where demolition is necessary, because the government is trying to provide a better living conditions for each of the family affected. For example, now some projects are offering about 800 square feet or up to 1,000 square feet.
Right.
So in some cases, definitely redevelopment, demolition is necessary. But in some cases, if the issue is only on maintaining the existing structure, for example, we have seen a lot of 70-story DBKL flats, not very...
not in good repair.
Not in good repair.
Yes.
Because I think it depends on the maintenance collection, which I think the resident need to commit in terms of maintaining. So the issues are more about maintenance.
Yep.
It's not really about the living conditions.
So would you say that this is an appropriate, quote-unquote, silver bullet to be able to address this?
Yeah.
Or do we actually have to look at it case-by-case basis rather than a whole block of about roughly 100 PPR,
Yes,
right?
yeah. And then if I look at some of these lists, and I happen to know a few of them.
Right, yes,
some
locality-wise.
of them, some of them, even though it's only 5-story walk-up apartment,
right,
the neighbor, the residents in that particular area are able to maintain a very good, clean environment for them to live. They even have a community garden, and this PPR is very near to LRT station.
Sure,
so
which facilitates the entire ecosystem of livelihood.
So it would be quite sad to see small-scale project like this to just disappear, and then we come up with a very high-density development in this particular area. So I guess it has to be project-by-project basis.
Yeah, on a case-to-case basis.
Yeah.
Case-to-case basis. I hear you on that. Datuk Chang, if I could ask about your perspectives on, so one proposal might be that under future URA, there would be facilitation for regeneration of underutilized land. Would that be something to support? Why or why not?
Well, we have got no objections to for redevelopment whatsoever. It's for the greater good, like I said. But however, when it comes to renewal plans, we have got empty laws. We got a hell of a lot of laws that we can adopt. Why is it that we need a new set of laws at all? I would like to take this opportunity also says that there are 3 categories of buyers.
Sure.
Okay, 3 categories of owners. First category are those investors and speculators who buy multiple units to flip. Okay. Second categories are those second, third generations of owners who inherited from their parents. The third categories of buyers are the owners are most important. They are the one who have taken out a 30-year loan, diligently paid installments for it, never failed, and had the roof over their family. These are the ones that we have a sentiment about. They could be the group of people who is going to be a descending group who objects to it because they do not wish to be uprooted from their neighborhood, where they've very cultivated all these years. Why would they want to come in and suffer the fate of gentrification when new crowds comes in? Like for instance, the walk-up flats of 5 stories, suddenly you have a 50-story building and you have got new wealthy owners, speculators coming in. They will not be able to tolerate such a thing because maintenance sinking fund is going to be cheap. For instance, a walk-up flat, the maintenance could be 75 ringgit. But when the building is up already with swimming pool and with facilities, the maintenance charges and sinking fund you're going to pay would be about $500 to $600. That's going to be a big problem for those existing owners.
Definitely. And one perspective which we have also seen actually covered in the media recently is, you know, close-up interviews with those impacted in such areas, and their primary concerns anchor around the potential lack of green space and green areas for children and for young adults to actually thrive and to use the outdoor space, right? Given that, of course, the apartments and the PPRs, they are small in size, but you have the green space right outside. This is not necessarily going to be maintained if you're going to redevelop that entire region, right?
Yep, correct.
Okay,
correct.
So moving a little deeper into what you had just mentioned, which was about the consent threshold. Now, is it reasonable at all to basically, in a sense, dilute the meaning of consent by making it from 100% to roughly about 75% when it comes to the owners agreeing upon whether or not to redevelop?
Well, it all depends on the owners themselves. One of the proposals we've made to the government is that let this redevelopment be initiated by the owners themselves. Do not force it upon in the form of a law to facilitate developers. Do not force upon the throat of the owners themselves. Let them form their own community. I call it a self-help program. Why don't if we intend to redevelop our area, why don't we get together? We appoint the professionals to come in. Town planner, we can surveyors, lawyers, architects, come up with a lucrative plan in such a way that it's for the betterment of all, the entire society. That's why, for instance, the MC community area. And then, subsequently, we will then decide what's best for ourselves. We don't need government intervention. What we need is perhaps to have a seed money from the government. Say, for instance, okay, if you are prepared to, you want us to do a redevelopment, by all means, there must be a common redevelopment fund. In such a way, buyers, owners can then apply to it with a program that, yes, I need professionals, I need seed money, so allocate to us about 200,000 so that we can bring in a professional study it. Then subsequently, we will then decide how best that we wish to have our redevelopment.
Correct indeed, because another perspective that comes up is that, let's say, for example, the URA goes ahead and tranches of different PPRs are earmarked and redevelopment begins. Where ideally would those who have been temporarily displaced, where would they be residing in the meanwhile before things are back to normal?
I see. Well, according to the Garis Panduan, that is issued by DBKL, all this about green lungs as well as the quantum of affordable housing, the density, kita boleh bincang. When you talk about kita boleh bincang, it's a very scary word, because that's where there's no accountability, there's no transparency. So very fearful over the kita boleh bincang punya area. So as far as we're concerned on here, we are saying that let the buyers themselves decide what's best for themselves.
Let the buyers decide, indeed.
To come up with a threshold of 70%, 80% whatsoever, to us, our stand in the National House Buyer Association, no. It must be the wholesome 100%. No compromise at all.
Yes, correct.
Because this is very important.
Diluting the meaning of consent, right?
Yeah. We are compromising our rights over to the new law, which is in contravention of Article 13 of the Federal Constitution.
Minority owners as well.
My house is my castle. Nobody can take the house away from me.
Fair enough. Puan Saleha, so digging a little bit deeper into the need to ensure public consultation and stakeholder engagement in urban redevelopment projects, how ought this to be ideally conducted? And especially given the potential number of projects, what kind of a timeline ideally should be looked at in your experience?
Okay, good question. I'm waiting for this question.
That's right, exactly. Let's get into the nitty-gritty details, right?
Okay, I would like to look at Singapore again.
Okay, sure, please.
Okay. To get the buy-in from the residents, because they know they are planning for these people to live in that neighborhood. And then crowdsourcing ideas from them is very important. And there are many ways of crowdsourcing ideas from the people. For example, you can have online discussion. For example,
sure, you don't have to always gather in person.
Yeah, you don't always have to gather, because sometimes when there is a gathering, people tend to be very aggressive in the discussion, right?
Fair enough. You can mitigate and you know, regulate your emotions perhaps a bit better.
And then you can also have workshop. You can have in-depth discussion, and you can actually engage professional to conduct the discussion. And then I know in Hong Kong and also Singapore, they even conduct competition for school children to come up with their ideas of what kind of city that they would like to live in. So they have a big workshop, and then all of the children participate, and then they come up with a very creative idea. I think in Hong Kong, this is still on display. You can even have a look how creative the children are, because normally children are not consulted.
Of course, and children also use public spaces, right?
So we have to understand what kind of space that they need, and then in terms of walkability to the school, how should we design the area to be safe for them to walk to the school. So I think this public consultation is very important. And then there are many ways. So it should not only be limited to one public session when you call 200 people to come in, and then the developer come up with their presentation. It should be more engaging between the affected residents.
More collaborative as well.
Not only the affected residents, but also the business players around that particular area.
Small businesses, for example, who may actually get phased out without any prior notice, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be discussed, particularly one thing that I want to zone in on before we take a quick break is that there's a lot of urgency regarding project timelines. So the concern from the rakyat's perspective really now might be about the URA bulldozing ahead and minimal or insufficient stakeholder consultations happening. Your thoughts on that?
Okay. Timelines is very subjective.
Okay.
Timeline is very subjective, and then who are we to determine timelines for the residents? Right. So which is why public consultation is very important. And then normally, if you don't get, if the public consultation is not very successful, typically high-rise will take about 3 to 4 years to develop. But I can assure you, it will be even longer. When it comes to if you don't have a proper public consultation. In fact, I'm currently involved in one project.
Right.
I think they had a very minimum public consultation. So when we try to work on the master plan, even the master plan stage take longer than what is expected, because along the way we get feedback from the local community, and then government agencies will ask us to engage with the local communities, what are their concerns, and then we have to go back to point A.
Exactly. There's no choice actually. So that is of course the expert recommendation, ensure that sufficient time is allocated, but also that it's a rigorous enough stakeholder engagement. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for the discussion so far, Puan Saleha, Datuk Chang. We do take a quick break. We'll be right back with Niaga Spotlight right here on Astro AWANI. Don't go anywhere.
Lokasi korang di hati Malaysia. Inilah finalis musikal lawak superstar.
Putih dan suara harap perempuan jadi killer.
Saya pun tak pernah tengok duyung macam ni. Jauh, daripada KL semenyih, KL semenyih.
Korang memang layak untuk masuk final.
Kualiti dan kebolehan.
You memang sangat cute.
Kumpulan mana yang akan dinobat sebagai juara? Saksikan pentas akhir musikal lawak superstar musim keempat di Astro Warna dan Astro Go.
Sang juara tidak pernah berhenti.
They just do not give in.
Namun, musuh kental terus membayangi Guardiola.
Would you believe it?
Mungkin ini masanya Spurs mampu mencalarkan rekod City di halaman sendiri.
It's an opportunity. What a shot!
Segalanya bakal terungkai secara langsung. Premier League eksklusif di Astro.
Welcome back to Niaga Spotlight, still with me, Tehmina. Today, of course, we're focusing on urban redevelopment and balancing the rakyat's interests with the developers. So, Datuk Chang, progressing the discussion a little bit. Now, the proposed URA for Malaysia appears to draw some inspiration from Singapore, Hong Kong. Of course, Puan Saleh has gone a little bit into perspectives on how Singapore has done well, considering, of course, their demographic and geographic constraints that forces them to have to be not just innovative, but actually inclusive. So your thoughts on it, and about how is it appropriate that we are actually sort of taking so much from these legislations for countries which are geographically and landmass-wise very different from Malaysia?
Yeah, correct. I've explained on numerous occasions that Singapore and Hong Kong, there are only leasehold lands there for the existing buildings, and new developments there are scarce on the island. Can you fancy even Singapore has got a new URA in such a way that they need 90% consent if the buildings are less than 10 years old. It can be demolished. I can't comprehend the fact why Singapore require to demolish the totally new building that is 10 years old. It doesn't make sense at all. But in Malaysia, we have both leasehold, freehold. But what is glaring and significant is that they got bigger land mass. Singapore, Hong Kong has got bigger land mass. Why is it that we need to saturate all our development within Kuala Lumpur? Why don't we just do it outskirt? Now, for instance, from the statistics I've read, the Singapore and Hong Kong are the fourth and third densely populated area compared to us. This is according to United Nations data of 2021. We are ranked 46. So where is it that we go and collect data from Singapore, Hong Kong, and emulate them? Why don't we have our own style? Now, URA to me is arguably a necessary evil in both Singapore and Hong Kong, all that, due to pressing urban redevelopment. But those arguments do not hold water in Malaysia.
Because our urban concentration is quite different. So ideally speaking, what should that look like for Malaysia? What would our style of urban redevelopment look like?
Our style of urban redevelopment basically should be self-initiated program. And on top of that, if the government wants to look into refurbishment, please, by all means, because last year, budget 2023, the government allocated $50 million for refurbishment, upgrading a lift, and for painting. Why don't the government come up with the same program? You don't have to demolish a totally nice building. If you really need to, because the building has been certified condemned or dilapidated, by all means, local council certify that the building is condemned, by all means, go ahead with that. That will be for the greater good of the country.
This brings me to a point that I would like to raise regarding the fact that with regards to development, there are actually various projects, particularly housing. And as of September 2024, the latest stats are showing that we've got more than almost close to 50,000 units that have not been completed. And there's around 15,000 or so buyers who have confirmed payments, brought them forward, but it has not been fulfilled. Looking at this landscape as well, Datuk Chang, what about harmonizing with the fact that there are plenty of buyers for completely new property developments whose agreements have not been honoured yet, but at the same time we are looking at massive redevelopments of areas where there are already existing residents. There does seem to be a lot of dissonance between these two. Correct. Your thoughts?
I can't comprehend why the Minister of Housing has got his priority wrong. Our priority now is to revive all abandoned projects. I call abandoned projects problematic. The government dissected into three categories: progress sakit, lewat, and terbengkalai.
That's
if
right.
you add up all this, to me, it's all problematic. And if you can't handle revival abandoned project or trying to make sure that the house are all completed and given to the aggrieved buyers, these are all victims, that we got to take care of. Why come up with a new law? So I like to use this word: don't bite more than you can chew. If you can't even handle current problems, don't come up or open up a new can of worms on URA. That's another new can of worms, because there will come a situation, be forewarned, that if we have got the URA, buyers partake into the project.
Right.
They sign contracts with the developers in the form of power attorney or joint venture, whatever they surrender, in exchange for one unit. What if the project then subsequently defunct? What if the developer then is wound up? Who is going to be responsible? I've asked the Minister of Housing before, are you going to underwrite it to make sure that these projects get completed. He says, no, it's a private venture. Exactly. If it's a private venture, why is it that you need to come up with the Urban Redevelopment Act to facilitate the developer? Allow house buyers themselves to initiate.
So can I then interject, Datuk Chang, and ask about the fact that let's say there are developers en masse. Now, some of them, if they have been unable to fulfill completion of projects, I think there also needs to be a check and balance system that ensures those developers are not allowed to even put in tender to be able to go for urban redevelopment projects. Is there a mechanism like that right now?
Wow, presently there is no such mechanism.
Right, so basically you may have been able to actually abandon and not, you know, for fulfilled projects, be they in those three categories, sick, demolished or under completed, and also still be pitching for other projects.
Correct.
Okay.
Knowing developers,
I see the whole.
Every project has got different subsidiary. They've got different subsidiary. It's basically cost, administrative process. If that project fails, that company goes down. The Syarikat Indo, that's a parent company, will not be affected. We did also told the government down here, we got to find a mechanism to make sure that the government underwrite, if not, the mother company is underwrite. Who is going to be responsible if the building, a totally nice building, get demolished and the developers go defunct?
Absolutely. Thanks very much for that, Datuk Chang. Puan Saleha, now moving into looking at looking a little bit deeper into the socio-economic constraints, right? Let's look at moving beyond the actual residents, but you also have visitors to the city, you also have those who come into the city specifically for work itself. Looking at the urban redevelopment landscape, how does this impact the overall viability as well as livability of a cityscape like Kuala Lumpur?
Okay. If we look at many cities in the Western countries, many of the historical or heritage buildings have been preserved, and these buildings have been successfully repurposed to attract tourists. Because when tourists come to our country, what they would like to see are the heritage or historical buildings.
Of course.
And are we maintaining enough of these heritage and historical buildings? I think rather than demolishing new projects, I concur with Datuk Chang that one of the focus should be in these old heritage buildings. Because especially if the buildings are closer to transport hub,
as many of them often are, being in central KL.
Yes, like for location, for example, like around KL central area. So when you rejuvenate the area, providing good landscaping, safer for people to walk, I think even the private sector will come in and preserve the buildings.
Very true.
Yeah.
You want to actually encourage facilitating this ecosystem.
Yes. So by beautifying the landscape of that particular area, and then indirectly you will attract more investment, and then we talk about bringing life into the city. So by reviving some of these older buildings, I mean revive meaning refurbishing some of the older
ensuring
buildings.
they are structurally safe and sound.
Yes, because if you look at life cycle of the building, a building can last for at least 50 years. We completed a study on that, and then the engineers confirmed that it can last for 50 years.
Right. So around 50 years, but given that you have sufficient sort of refurbishment happening. Correct. So that actually brings us to the point that basically when it comes to redeveloping and also to upkeeping public heritage landmarks, would you say that there ought to be stakeholder engagements, particularly with business owners who might be in the surrounding areas? And in your experiences, such studies, have they proved to have successful outcomes, harmonious outcomes?
I don't have any direct study in by engaging the business owners, but you can see what is happening in Penang, Georgetown UNESCO.
That's correct.
That's right. In fact, one of our branches is located within the heritage area in Penang. So I think because the business owners, the landlords know that they are in this particular heritage area, they take their own initiative to maintain the landscape of that particular area.
That's right.
So that it will continue to bring businesses and also tourists.
Exactly. So it's all about creating an integrated ecosystem.
Yes. So self-regulation.
Self-regulation.
Yeah, self-regulation. Government can give seed money, a small amount of seed money to kickstart the refurbishment. But I think after a while, once the business owners are quite successful in running their businesses, they would have money to self-maintain the particular area.
Absolutely. Lots to chew upon. Thank you very much. Now, Datuk Chang, so looking at the URA provisions, let's look at how it might impact and influence urban migration patterns in particular.
I see. Well, there are plenty of development lands in Greater KL. I've, in fact, I have discussion with the ministry, related ministry, especially, those government-related lands, especially real estate corporation.
Right.
We have got beautiful rail lines throughout Malaysia.
Yes, we do.
Why don't we develop those lands along the tracks, over the station? Those are ideal for infrastructures already. Ample of lands there. Why is it that we need to come into Kuala Lumpur already congested already and to have all beautiful buildings all demolished when the same infrastructures have not changed? The size of infra has not changed. There's a case in Sri Petaling the same. We have got walk-up flats, about 5-story walk-up flats there. We have got a masjid, we got Taman Permainan, and we also have got a nice hall there. The developer, on the pretext of wanting to redevelop, several developers went in and started painting a picture that I can develop it for you for a 50-story building. But how could a 50-story building be on the same piece of land that infra, roads, system, as well as schools are all within the same parameters? It cannot be developed further. The only way is to go up. If it's go upwards, then we have got problems as to the transportation, traffic jams, and floodings. Those are very crucial things that we must know. I have also spoken to the government basically, hey, why don't we have businesses outskirts of Kuala Lumpur, like Tanjung Sepat. They're famous for fish balls. Why don't we have cottage industry for them? Do not encourage urban migration. We have seen a lot of young students, graduates from Kota Baru, Alor, coming to Kuala Lumpur and then hungling into the small town of Kuala Lumpur or city of Kuala Lumpur and then staying in a very unhygiene condition. That's not fair over to them. I don't think the parents brought them up that way.
And I think it's all about reframing the perspective into not so much urban migration, but let's look at urban sprawl instead. Would that be a better kind of perspective to be coming in from, looking at actually widening rather than deepening the concentration?
Yes, I agree with you. I think that's a very good suggestion. I shall write it down.
All right.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Please do. I just wanted to ask, because you had briefly mentioned just earlier, Datuk Chang. Now, looking at it once again, Article 13 of Federal Constitution, it does, of course, safeguard rights to property. So what legal recourse would be available for residents and owners who actually might be, in the future, opposing redevelopment plans if there is insufficient stakeholder consultation?
Well, the consent threshold, like I said, it's in contravention of Article 13 of Federal Constitution. That this proposed URA does not only infringe on the fundamental constitutional rights, but also usurp the rights of indivisibility of title under the torrent system. We've got a national land code. Once we register our name onto a title, we are the owner, and public at large must recognize us as the owner. Nobody can take the land away from us. The URA should not be seen as eroding our rights. The fact that you have this URA doesn't mean that our rights are demolished, diminished. The aggrieved buyers, once the law is there, aggrieved buyers can subsequently take the case to court to challenge whether this particular law URA is constitutional or not. That's within the right.
And perhaps also there ought to be mechanisms inside to ensure there's fair compensation for compulsory acquisition in certain cases which foreseeably may due out.
Yeah, but then there are also people who are not interested in compensation. There are people who have been living there for a long time. They like the neighborhood. They see the child grow from there. They see the feng shui being very good, very accessible to all the market facilities, all that. Why should I be uprooted?
So it speaks
it's not
towards
a compensation.
So it actually speaks to the fact that appeal mechanisms need to be diverse enough to address various interests.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Now, Puan Saleha, moving into looking at cost effectiveness in particular when it comes to urban redevelopment. In your experience with looking at urban economics, how is this best rolled out?
In terms of cost effectiveness, cost is not only defined by RM. Okay, we also have to look at ESG elements of the redevelopment. And then many of these redevelopment, if we are just uprooting the existing residents to a new location and so on, we are kind of missing the S element in the ESG.
That's correct.
Yeah? So S refer to the social elements of the ESG lah. And then, but when we look at from developers' perspective, because developers are private entity, they exist to run business and to make money. So indirectly, whenever you have redevelopment, to make it cost efficient, there would need to be an affordable category and also open market category.
Fair enough.
So in many cases, there will be a cross subsidy in terms of pricing to lower the cost for the affordable component. You need to transfer some of the cost to the other side, the open market side. That indirectly push the open market price higher.
So it's all about the tiers as well, but at the same time, so it does seem like, especially when it comes to ESGs, right? The overall perspective is about incorporating green building standards and incentives. That can quite as easily also be done when it comes to refurbishing existing urban developments rather than bringing down the entire entity and then, of course, potentially falsifying GDP by bringing up something brand new.
Yeah, there's many ways of addressing the ESG, especially on the environmental and then greening the particular area, which is why moving forward, in any affordable homes, if we are trying to cut down on costs, biophilic design could be one of the approach that developers should look at. Green features doesn't have to be expensive because you can blend the natural element together with the physical elements. For example, direct connectivity to the park, they can just walk. So you don't have to install very expensive fittings to make the units green. And then lighting is also very important because the current design, you know, the courtyard, they have a courtyard in the center, but the courtyard is hardly used because many of them will use it to park their motorbikes and to put all of their stuff.
So perhaps a clear entrance area allocated and also brightly lit to encourage children and people and also even elderly adults to fraternize and of course make use of the space.
Yes, people can hang around in the afternoons. And then I think a long time ago when I started studying urban planning in Chicago, I think in the 40s or 50s, they demolished high-rise, low-cost units.
I see, okay.
Because I was in my very fresh year, I was wondering why do you want to demolish this tall building when you can fit in so many people? But the issue with very high-density development, crime was also high.
Right.
Crime was also high, and then when you put a lot of people with socio-economic problems, definitely there will be a lot of social issues also within that particular area. So what they did, they demolished and then they redevelop into a more human scale development.
Right. So I think it's also about the built environment then influencing how socio-economic factors play out. Fantastic. Thanks very much. Dr. Chang, Puan Saleha, I'd like to close out the discussions. First, going into Dr. Chang and asking you about some thoughts to just summarize basically the proposed urban redevelopment legislation and which concerns need to be foremost.
Wow. To me, URA is not something that is very important. It's not in our priority list. We have got a lot more other things like abandoned projects. Government should embark into sorting out all the abandoned projects, all that. On top of that, there are a lot of defunct developers. We are also talking about a lot of nakal developers, those developers who do not toe the line, all that. For the last 10 years, there have not been any prosecution at all.
Once again, I'll refer back to what I said, is that there needs to be a list that's actually tracking whether these developers who are already on the offending side are also pitching for these proposed urban redevelopment projects. That will actually sort both issues in one fell swoop.
Yeah, true.
Yes.
Yeah. But this blacklisted, the Ministry of Housing actually has got this list of blacklisted developers. They, of course, they identified through the board of directors, not just the, the name. Because developers, as we know, set up separate legal entities, all that. But then the minister even gone to the extent of blacklisting the directors, having to go overseas. The passport is not going to be allowed to go overseas whatsoever. And then just recent report, he talked about family members too should not be in the position to go overseas. They will be affected if the parent or the husband of a developed company has gone defunct.
That's right.
This is stretching it too much, really. How can the poor innocent wife and children be blacklisted when the father has failed his project?
So also moderation of...
Right. Some project failed because of bad administration only. You cannot across the board, so all are blacklisted. The entire family is all blacklisted because the father has failed. This is
so it needs to be company specific. Thank you very much, Dr. Chang. Puan Saleha, last parting thoughts on some main takeaway.
Okay, one key takeaway from me, crowdsourcing ideas from the local community is very important. And I think we need to explore more ways on how do we get ideas from the local communities, the business owners, the professional, and also even NGOs.
So I think it's all about being integrative, inclusive, and also bringing in an intersectional perspective of how it's going to involve different effects on different families who may be living in the same area. Thank you very much for the insightful discussion so far. We really hope that the appropriate parties are not only listening, but will take action on them. Well, that's all the time that we have today on Niaga Spotlight. I'm Tehmina Kaoosji signing off, wishing you all a productive week ahead, and we'll see you again next week.